Story number 2. The pumpkins went out all at once, like someone blew out the whole town's breath in a single exhale. But that's not the strange part. The strange part is, I think it was my fault. No, I know it was, because I was the only one awake when the lights died, and the only one who remembers what happened after. They all went out at once, every single jack-o'-lantern in the town. 1 second, 100 orange faces smiling in the dark, and then nothing, just black, like someone exhaled and snuffed out Halloween itself. I know what you're thinking. Power outage, prank, bad wiring. That's what I told myself too, but this wasn't that. I swear the air changed. It was as if something alive had stopped breathing. Anyway, maybe I should start from the beginning, though I'm not sure there is a beginning. Everything feels circular now, looping back to that same street, that same row of glowing pumpkins. See, in my town, Maple Hollow, Halloween isn't just a night, it's a ritual. Every porch gets a pumpkin, carved and lit from sunset till midnight. The pumpkin walk, they call it. Families stroll with cocoa and flashlights. Kids in costumes trip over their own excitement. The whole town looks like it's holding its breath in orange light, and for years I loved it. Until last year, that's when it happened. I probably shouldn't even be talking about this. The police said the fire was an accident. The papers stopped asking questions and everyone else just moved on. But you can't move on from something that still burns behind your eyelids. Tonight was supposed to be quiet. I told myself I wouldn't even go outside. I told myself I'd stay in, let the candles die on their own. But when the first pumpkin went out, I heard it. That sound, like a sigh dragged through dry leaves. I thought it was the wind, or maybe I wanted it to be. I stepped outside anyway. The air had that sharp October bite, cold enough to wake you but soft enough to make you think you're still dreaming. The sky was low, heavy, swollen with clouds that refused to rain. Streetlights buzzed like gnats, and all along Maple Street the jack-o'-lanterns flickered. The faces were different this year. People carved them smaller, sharper, not the goofy grins from before, more like grimaces. Maybe that's what grief does to a town. It changes the way people smile. I walked past the old bakery first. The windows were dark. Mrs. Pennington's pumpkin, always a cat, was gone. Not unlit. Gone. Just an empty patch of porch with a round ring of wax. By the time I reached the post office, half the pumpkins were already out. The air smelled faintly of smoke. Not burning wood, not quite. Something sweeter, closer to burnt sugar. It made my stomach twist. That's when my phone buzzed. One text. Lena, you promised you wouldn't go near that house again. My heart jumped like it had been waiting for her to say that. I didn't reply. You probably think Lena's my girlfriend. She's not anymore. She used to be. Before everything. She's the kind of person who forgives too easily, or pretends to, but she never forgets. And neither do I. When the fire happened last year, she was there. Not inside, but close enough to see the glow, to hear me screaming her name. The way she looked at me afterward, like she couldn't tell if I needed help or handcuffs. That look stuck. I tell myself I'm not going back to that house. But every year, when the pumpkins come out, I feel it calling, like the fire never really ended. I kept walking, passing porch after porch, until I reached the old oak near the bridge, the one that still had scorch marks on its roots. That's when the wind stopped. The whole night went still. Even the bugs shut up. You know that silence before something happens? That heavy, wrong silence? It felt like that. Then, pop. A single pumpkin beside the bridge flickered, its grin collapsing into smoke. I froze. Another went out, then another. Like dominoes, The lights died in a perfect rhythm down the street, each one snuffing itself in sync with my heartbeat. By the time I looked back, the whole block was dark. I swear I saw movement, a shape, low to the ground, sliding between porches. But every time I tried to focus, it vanished behind the fog. My phone light cut through the air like a blade, but it didn't reach far. The darkness felt thick, almost solid. Another text buzzed. "Lena, please, go home." I almost did. Really. But then I heard it again. That sound, not a whisper, not quite a voice, but it knew my name. It said my name. That's when I realized something strange. The air wasn't cold anymore. It was warm, the same way it felt that night. The fire night. My palms started to sweat. My throat filled with the taste of ash. People always ask why I went back there that night. Why I didn't call for help sooner. Truth is, I don't remember. Or maybe I just don't want to. The mind plays tricks when it's scared, right? Still, as I stood on that bridge, the warmth around me pulsed like breath. And for a moment, I swore I saw the orange glow again. The one from the fire. Only it wasn't coming from the house this time. It was coming from under the bridge. A low hum crawled through the air like candle wax bubbling. My phone screen glitched. The text thread with Lena looping, repeating the same words. "You promised you wouldn't go near that house again." That's when I realized I wasn't even near it yet. I turned toward the end of the street, where the last row of pumpkins stood. Their faces were all the same this time. Wide eyes, open mouths, like they'd seen something terrible. I took one step closer, and all at once, every candle went out. Silence. Darkness. Then, in the middle of that dead quiet, something scraped across the pavement. Slow, deliberate, metal on stone. I held my breath. And just before everything went black, my phone lit up with one final message. "Lena, don't go inside." But I already was. I told myself I wasn't going back there. But the road decided for me. It's funny how your feet remember places your mind swears it's forgotten. The fog thickened the further I walked, curling low around my legs like something alive. Every porch behind me was dark now. Every jack-o'-lantern dead. The town that always glowed this time of year looked hollow, empty, like a body missing its heartbeat. I kept telling myself I was just walking home, that's all. Home. But the longer I walked, the more I realized I was taking the old route. The one that led to the edge of town, where the road split at the dried-up creek bed. Where the Wilkes house stood. Even saying the name feels wrong, like biting down on metal. People in Maple Hollow don't talk about that house anymore. Not after the fire. They built fences, warning signs, even a new road to keep kids away. But every Halloween, someone still sneaks up there. It's a dare now. A game. They don't know it isn't a game. I saw it before I reached the hill. The shadow of the house, half eaten by fog. Every other home on the street still had the faint outline of decorations. Ghosts made of sheets, paper bats stuck to doors. But not this one. No jack-o'-lanterns, no porch light, just a gaping front door that never seemed to close all the way. The house with no pumpkins. I remember being 8 the first time I broke in. We used to tell each other the screams people heard would just wind through the rafters. Back then, I even believed it. It was harmless. Old wood settling, wind moaning, maybe a raccoon knocking things over. But now, standing there again, I couldn't remember if I'd actually heard the screams or made them. The grass was brittle under my shoes, frosted. I could smell the ash before I even touched the gate. Faint, but real, like the house still exhaled smoke after all these years. I brushed my hand against the railing. It came back black with soot. I didn't want to go in. I didn't. But when I looked behind me, the street was gone, just grey. The world had folded in on itself, and the only thing left was the house. So I stepped inside. The floor moaned under me. My light caught the wallpaper, still peeling in long, charred ribbons. The air was warmer here, thick and close, like someone else was breathing just over my shoulder. I whispered, "Hello?" before I could stop myself. Nothing, just the slow crackle of cooling wood. I started narrating out loud, a stupid habit I picked up from therapy. "It's just a memory," I said to no one. "Nothing here can hurt you." That's when I heard it, a soft, deliberate knock. 3 taps from upstairs. My light shook. I told myself it was pipes, settling wood, anything. But deep down, I knew this house didn't have running water anymore. It hadn't since that night. I found myself at the bottom of the staircase. The steps were black, edges curled like paper after flame. I remembered how they looked when I was younger, before the fire. When I used to race up them, laughing, calling for someone. Who was I calling for? It hit me then. A flash, a woman at the top of the stairs, her face hidden by light, shouting my name. The sound of glass breaking, then heat, too much heat. I stumbled back, blinked, and the hallway was empty again. "It's fine," I whispered. "It's just your brain filling blanks." But my brain shouldn't have remembered how the wallpaper smelled when it burned, sweet, chemical, almost floral. Or how the fire ate from the inside out, not the other way around. I shouldn't have known that. Something flickered upstairs, a faint orange glow. I froze. My breath fogged in front of me even though the air was hot. "Lena," I said before I could think. No answer. I started up the stairs anyway. The first step held. The second groaned like something alive. By the third, the boards creaked in rhythm, like footsteps that weren't mine. Halfway up, my phone buzzed again. One new message. "Lena, you need to stop this, please." "Stop what?" I wanted to ask. But the moment I lifted the phone, the signal vanished. Static filled the screen, then cleared, for just a second, showing the camera app. My own reflection in the dark, only my reflection was smiling. I dropped the phone. It hit the floor and went silent. When I looked up, the orange light was gone. But there was something else, whispering. Not loud, not words, just a soft breathy sound that moved like water through the walls. I could feel it against my ear, tracing syllables it never finished. Then it said my name. Not gently, not like Lena, like her. I don't even know who her is anymore. I reached the top of the stairs and turned toward the hallway. There, at the very end, I saw it. A faint shimmer in the air, like heat rising from pavement. Behind it, a door slightly ajar. I told myself not to go in. I went in anyway. The room looked untouched. Bed frame, half-melted lamp, wallpaper curled into black petals. But the air felt wrong. Thick. Wet. And when I stepped closer, the floor dipped like something hollow underneath. Then, a sound I'll never forget. A single click, not from my phone, from behind me. I turned, and there she was. Or at least, something shaped like her. Her face was pale, cracked down the middle like scorched porcelain. Her eyes glowed faintly, reflections of a flame that wasn't there. And when she spoke, it was my voice that came out. "You shouldn't have come back." The walls groaned. The smell of burning wax filled the air. I could hear the crackle of 100 pumpkins lighting themselves outside. Orange flares through the broken window. But the house had no pumpkins. It never did. Then, as quickly as it came, the glow died again. Every light gone, leaving me alone in the dark. I fumbled for my phone, shaking. The screen flickered to life, displaying one new message. Lena, if you're in there, don't look in the basement. I looked up. The door at the end of the hall was open now. A faint orange shimmer glowed beneath it. And from somewhere below, something whispered. Not my name this time, but come back. You ever see yourself on a screen before you remember being filmed? Because that's what happened to me. The handle burned my palm when I opened the basement door. The smell hit first. Something chemical, something sweet, like melted film reels and rot. The air was thick with heat, humming like a machine waking from sleep. I remember thinking that basements weren't supposed to breathe, but this one did. Every exhale came with a faint electric pulse. I started down the stairs, each step slick with soot. My flashlight was gone, my phone nearly dead. Still, the orange glow below flickered stronger the deeper I went, as if it knew I was coming. Halfway down, the whisper came again. Play it. The voice was almost gentle now, soft, coaxing. I told myself it was the wind, just the house shifting, but the way it used my name made my knees lock. Not again, I muttered. Not this time. But my body didn't listen. The stairs opened into a wide, low-ceilinged basement lined with blackened concrete. The smell of burnt insulation clung to everything. In the center of the room sat an old CRT television on a metal cart, the kind they used to roll into classrooms. Its glass screen glowed with a dim orange haze. Beside it, a VCR blinked 12 hour over and over, the digits trembling. And on the floor, a cardboard box filled with VHS tapes, each one labeled in shaky handwriting. I leaned down and wiped the soot away from the nearest one. Pumpkin Walk, 2005. My throat tightened. That was the year of the fire, the year the Wilkes family disappeared. I looked around. The basement was filled with burnt toys, cracked photo frames, half-melted candles still stuck in their holders. And yet somehow the tapes were untouched, clean, unburned, as if they'd been waiting all this time. I picked up the first tape. My hands were trembling so badly I almost dropped it, but something deep in me, curiosity or guilt, made me push it into the VCR. The machine whirred. The static gave way to an image. At first, all I saw was darkness and the faint sound of wind. Then the picture cleared, a porch lined with jack-o'-lanterns, familiar ones. Maple Hollow, years ago. Kids laughing, parents chatting, the camera shaking slightly as if held by someone walking. And then a voice. My voice. Come on, Lena. Just one more house. This one's special. I froze. My hand went numb. I don't remember filming that. I don't even remember owning a camera. The video shifted. The shot panned across the street, stopping at the Wilkes house. Even on tape, it looked wrong. The windows were boarded up, but light still flickered behind them. The jack-o'-lanterns outside burned brighter than the others, flames dancing too high, too fast. Don't go in there, Lena's voice said from behind the camera. But the image shook as the door creaked open. I heard footsteps, my own voice, closer now, whispering something I couldn't quite make out. Then a flash, bright orange, and the tape cut to static. The screen flickered again. New footage, a different angle. The same house, but this time engulfed in fire. Screams, glass breaking, a shape in the window, small, childlike. And in the reflection of the glass, I saw myself, holding the camera. I ripped the tape out and threw it across the room. The sound echoed, a hollow plastic thud that didn't fade right away. Then came the laughter. It wasn't from the TV this time. It was coming from the far corner of the basement, where the shadows moved wrong, stretching against the light instead of away from it. "Who's there?" I called out. My voice cracked, no answer. Just the faint scrape of something on the floor. Slow, deliberate. The TV flickered back on by itself. Static again, but underneath it, a voice. Mine. "You said you'd fix it." I backed up until I hit the cold wall. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. "No," I whispered. "That wasn't me. I didn't." But the screen disagreed. The image returned. Me, sitting in that very basement, older, gaunt, eyes ringed with soot. I was talking to someone off screen. The sound crackled, but I could make out a few words. Second chance. They deserved light. I didn't mean to leave them. Then the camera panned slowly, shakily, revealing what sat beside me in that recording, a row of jack-o'-lanterns, each carved with a face I recognized. The Wilkes family, the mother, the father, the little boy. And at the end of the row, one more pumpkin, smaller, with a crooked smile and hollow eyes. Lena's. My knees gave out. I dropped to the floor, the sound of my breath scraping against the static. I wanted to turn away, to shut it off, but I couldn't. The me on the screen was still talking, still confessing. It wasn't the fire that killed them, it was the ritual. I tried to bring the light back. I didn't know what it would take. The tape cut again, another flash of orange. The smell of burning wax filled the basement, real this time. I looked down. Wax was dripping from the ceiling. No, not wax. Melted pumpkin flesh, orange and steaming, pooling at my feet. The laughter came again, louder now, overlapping. Multiple voices, merging and separating, echoing the same phrase. Play it again. Play it again. Play it again. I scrambled toward the stairs, but the steps were gone. Only black walls and the orange pulse from the screen. I turned back to the TV. The image had changed. It was live. I could see myself, right there, standing in front of it, eyes wide, shaking. Behind me the shadows thickened. A shape stepped forward. Lena, or what was left of her. Her face was soft, molten, like a candle burned too long. Her voice was low, strangled through the speakers. "You promised you wouldn't go near that house again." I shook my head, choking on air. "I didn't mean to, I didn't." Her reflection on the screen leaned closer. "You lit the last one, didn't you?" Before I could answer, the TV began to smoke. The orange light flared, swallowing her face, swallowing the room. I screamed and lunged for the power cord, yanking it out of the wall. But the glow didn't die. It pulsed stronger, brighter, until all I could see was fire. And underneath the roar, I heard the faint mechanical whir again. The VCR loading another tape. I stumbled back, hands shaking. The screen went black for a breath. Then a new image flickered on. It wasn't the past this time. It was now. Footage of me, standing in this house, watching the screen. Every movement mirrored perfectly. And behind me, in the doorway, something else started to move. The reflection twisted its head, smiling. Then the sound came again. That whisper I can't escape. Curling through static, through flame, through time itself. You can't stop the light. You are the light. The tape began to rewind on its own, faster and faster, the whirring turning into a high-pitched shriek. My phone lit up with one final message before the battery died. Lena. Don't watch the last tape. It's not for you. The room started to vibrate. The jack-o'-lanterns carved into the walls flared to life one by one. I covered my face as the heat rose, and just before everything went white, I saw what was written on the final tape label, half melted, lying beside the TV. When the jack-o'-lanterns went out. I woke up before the sirens. That's how I knew it was real this time. There was no smoke, no flame, just a sky the color of bruised metal and air that tasted like ash and cold rain. My throat burned as if I'd swallowed the night whole. I was lying in the middle of Maple Hollow's main street, my clothes wet, my hands black with soot. The world around me was too quiet. The pumpkins were gone. Every porch that had glowed just hours ago now stood bare. Melted stems, scorched wood, empty spaces where light used to live. I sat up slowly, heart pounding in my chest. My phone buzzed weakly beside me, cracked screen blinking. One unread message, Lena, it's over. Don't go back. But I didn't remember leaving. I didn't remember escaping. The last thing I saw was the flicker of that final tape. My face on the screen, melting into light. And then nothing. The Wilkes house stood at the end of the road, black smoke curling from its windows. It was morning now, but the light didn't reach that side of town. The air shimmered around the roof like heat still rising from an invisible fire. I tried to tell myself it was over, that the nightmare ended when the tape did, but something in me knew better. Because the jack-o'-lanterns weren't the only things missing. There were no people, not one. No neighbors stepping outside to assess the damage. No children crying. No sirens approaching. Just the low hum of the wind and the faint buzz of power lines that should have been dead. I staggered to my feet. The pavement beneath me was wet but warm. My reflection in the puddles looked wrong. Too still, too focused. When I blinked, it didn't. I looked up. The fog hadn't lifted. It was thicker now, clinging to every doorway, every corner. The silence pressed down on my ears until I could hear my own pulse. Somewhere in the distance, a sound rose. A rhythmic thud, steady as a heartbeat. Then came the smell. Not smoke this time. Wax. Burnt and sweet. The first jack-o'-lantern flickered to life at the far end of the street. Just one. Faint, stuttering. Then another. And another. Within seconds, the whole street glowed again. Perfect rows of orange light returning as if the night had never ended. But none of them were carved the same as before. Every face was mine. Some smiling, some screaming, some weeping. Each one flickered with a different rhythm, like they were breathing. I stumbled back, heart hammering. No, I whispered. No, I put them out. I ended it. The wind shifted, and a voice floated through it, soft and familiar. You said that last year too. I spun around. No one there. Just shadows and fog. But I knew that voice. I'd know it anywhere. Lena. Silence. Then, faintly, from behind me. You shouldn't have watched the last tape. I turned again, and there she was, or the outline of her, standing just beyond the pumpkins, her shape flickering like static. Her eyes were two small embers, her mouth drawn in something halfway between sorrow and rage. You're not real, I said, though my voice shook. You died. Her head tilted, slow, unnatural. So did you. The words hit me like a blow. I wanted to deny it, but the longer I looked, the less certain I felt about where my body ended and the light began. My skin seemed translucent in the glow, orange veins pulsing beneath the surface. My breath fogged, but the air around me stayed hot. Behind Lena, the Wilkes house groaned. The roof sagged inward with a muffled crack. From one of the windows, a faint glow pulsed, the same steady rhythm as the pumpkin's light. I took a step toward her. What happened to the town? She didn't answer at first. just stared past me, eyes unfocused. Then she said, "You tried to make it better. You always do. You light the lanterns because you can't stand the dark." Her voice trembled, like she was remembering something she wished she could forget. But the light always needs something to burn. The realization crawled over my skin like frost. The Wilkes family, the fire, the tapes, none of it was random. It was all the same loop, repeating, reshaping itself each year when the candles were lit again. "Lena," I whispered. "What did I do?" The fog pulsed once, like the whole town was breathing with her. "You fed it. You always feed it." The pumpkins behind me flickered violently. The carved mouths twisted wider, teeth elongating into jagged grins. The air shimmered with heat. Somewhere beneath the street, I heard a low, rumbling growl, a furnace exhaling. I stumbled back, shielding my face from the growing light. The ground trembled. Cracks spread through the pavement, glowing orange from underneath. Wax bubbled up through them like blood. "Stop!" I shouted. "I didn't mean to." "You said that last time too," Lena whispered. The Wilkes house burst into flames. This time, no one screamed. The fire moved silently, swallowing the walls, the roof, the sky. And yet the smoke didn't rise. It sank, folding inward, dragging the light down with it. I ran, I don't know where, through streets that twisted and looped, every turn leading back to that house. The fire never got closer, but it never got smaller either. It was like running inside a reflection. Finally, I stopped in front of a mirror, an old storefront window still intact amid the ruin. I caught my breath, looked up, and froze. My reflection was smiling. Its eyes glowed orange, and in its hand it held a lighter. I looked down. My hand was empty. When I looked back up, the reflection moved first, raising the lighter toward its face. The flame flared, and I felt the heat bloom across my skin, even though there was no fire. Then I heard her again. "Lena." Close now, whispering right beside my ear. "The town doesn't wake up after the fire. It starts over." I turned toward her voice, but there was only darkness. The reflection's flame grew brighter, swallowing the glass. My vision blurred. I could hear children laughing, faint music from some long-gone Halloween parade, all blending into the roar of fire. And then, silence. The light blinked out. The pumpkins' glow died one by one, their carved faces collapsing into ash. The air went cold. When I opened my eyes, the street was gone. Only a field remained, blackened earth, a single burnt post in the distance. The Wilkes house was nothing but smoke. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. The screen lit weakly, though I swear the battery had died hours ago. New message, Pumpkin Walk, 2026, scheduled upload complete. My throat tightened. The fog began to rise again, curling in slow spirals. Somewhere within it, I saw faint orange lights blooming, one by one, like eyes reopening after sleep. I don't remember filming anything this year. I don't remember uploading, but the message stayed on the screen, time-stamped for next Halloween. As I stared at it, I realized the truth. The loop hadn't ended. It never did. I could already hear children laughing, far away but getting closer. "You can't stop the light," Lena's voice whispered again, fading into static. "You are the light." I looked up one last time. The horizon was burning, and as the first jack-o'-lantern flared back to life, I finally understood. The town never woke up. I did. Story number 2, if I break the rules, the forest takes me. That's what they said. But no one ever told me what happens when you follow them too perfectly. If I break the rules, The forest takes me. That's what they said, but no one ever told me what happens when you follow them too perfectly. That's how I usually start this story, because that's the line that stuck with me, the one I still hear whispering through the trees when the wind slides across the lake. When I first got here, I didn't think much of it. Camp Ashwood, they called it. Just a handful of wooden cabins, a tool shed, and a crooked pier stretching into the fog. The kind of place parents sent their kids to make memories and come back with sunburns and mosquito bites. But the camp had been shut down for years. Something about safety violations and unexplained incidents. I got the caretaker job from an email. No interview, no signature. Just a message with the subject line. Caretaker needed, Ashwood. Season ends when the lake freezes. The sender's name was Mr. D, but the weird thing? The email vanished from my inbox the next morning. Completely gone, like it had never been there. When I arrived, there was no one to greet me. Just a key in an envelope nailed to the signpost at the entrance. I remember thinking, how do they even know I'm here? The first few hours were quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that eats at the edges of sound until you start hearing things that aren't there, like breathing behind you or footsteps syncing perfectly with your own. That night, in the caretaker's cabin, I found the rules. They weren't printed like safety instructions. They were handwritten in thick, uneven strokes on yellowed paper that smelled like rain and iron. The top read, Rules for the Caretaker. There were 12 of them. Most were simple. Lock every cabin before sundown. Never stay in cabin 7. Do not enter the forest after dark. Ignore voices calling from the lake. But others were stranger. Always leave one lantern burning in the dining hall. If you see smoke from the chimney, do not investigate. If you find another copy of these rules, burn it. I laughed when I first read them, thought it was a prank, maybe an urban legend passed down from previous staff. But when I turned the page over, I saw my name written at the bottom. Eli, in my own handwriting, except I hadn't written it. I tried to explain that in my vlog later that night. Well, not vlog exactly. I just record things for myself. Audio logs mostly. Helps keep me sane out here. But when I played it back, there was a pause in the middle. An 8-second stretch of silence. And during that silence, I swear I heard something breathing right next to the mic. The days blended fast after that. Morning fog, cleaning, repairing fences, listening to the woods. The woods never stopped moving. You could feel them breathe, branches flexing, pine needles sighing. I told myself it was wind, but wind doesn't whisper your name. The first real sign something was off came on the 4th night. I was out by the pier, checking the locks on the canoes. The lake was flat, too flat. Not a ripple, not even from the wind. Then I saw it. A reflection in the water. Not mine. Someone standing right behind me. When I turned around, there was no one there. I left the lights on that night. Every single one. The next morning, when I went to make coffee, the rule sheet was gone from my desk. I thought maybe I'd misplaced it. Maybe I'd put it in one of the drawers. But when I opened the cabin door to step outside, I saw it nailed to the door frame. Fresh nails, wet ink, and one rule was different. Number 3 didn't read, "Do not enter the forest after dark" anymore. It said, "Do not let the forest see you." I didn't understand what that meant. Not then. But all day I felt like something was watching me. From the tree line, from the cracks in the windows, even from my reflection in the lake. That evening, the power flickered. Once. Twice. Then faintly, I heard children laughing near the shore. I remember freezing mid-step. The camp had been empty for years. There weren't supposed to be any children here, but I heard them. Soft giggles, splashing, a voice singing what sounded like a lullaby. I couldn't see them, just shadows moving across the mist. I called out, asked if anyone was there. The laughter stopped. Then something answered, a whisper, low, drawn out, Eli, follow the rules. I dropped the flashlight. When I picked it up, the pier was empty again. The surface of the water rippled, like something had just sunk below it. I went back to the cabin, locked the door, and checked the rules again. There was a 13th line now, tiny, scrawled at the bottom in that same ink. 13. Do not talk to the children by the lake. I didn't write that. I swear I didn't. That night I tried to sleep. Every creak of the cabin made my pulse spike. Every gust of wind sounded like breathing. I remember checking the clock at 2:17 a.m., then blinking, and it was 4:03. My phone battery had drained to 0, even though it had been charging. When I stepped outside at dawn, something else had changed. The trees were closer. I don't mean it looked that way. I mean the tree line itself had shifted inward, surrounding the camp in a perfect ring. No paths left leading out, and on the cabin door, a new piece of paper fluttered beneath the first. Same ink, same hand. Welcome to Camp Ashwood, caretaker. Do not forget Rule 3. Only now Rule 3 didn't say what it used to. It said, do not let them see you again. And that's when I realized something. Someone else had written those rules before me. Or maybe it was me all along. They were laughing. I know that sounds normal. Kids at a summer camp. But there wasn't a single child registered here this year. Not one. And yet, they were there. I heard them. The first time I noticed it, I thought it was a trick of the wind. The lake was calm that morning. Mist hovering over the water like a thin curtain. I was checking the canoe locks, humming a song I hadn't thought of in years, when it happened. Laughter, high-pitched, unsteady, bouncing across the fog, splashes in rhythm, almost musical. My skin prickled. There was no one there. The camp was empty. I told myself it's the echo, the fog, your mind playing games. I stepped closer to the shore. The sand was wet, sticky under my boots. And then I saw them. Shoes, tiny mud-caked sneakers, lined up perfectly at the water's edge. No socks, no children, just the shoes. I crouched down, touching one. Fresh mud clung to the sole. Fresh. Someone had been here recently. My pulse hammered. I grabbed my phone and called Mr. D. The line clicked, and then his calm, measured voice came through. Eli, there are no children registered this year. You must be imagining things. I laughed nervously. I'm not imagining it. There are shoes, footprints. Someone was here, I swear, he sighed. You know the rules, Eli. Do not interact with anything you're not supposed to. The camp is empty. Focus on your duties. I hung up, staring at the lake. The shoes were gone when I blinked. Just gone. No tracks in the mud either. I shook my head, thinking maybe I had dropped the flashlight or misremembered. But the memory of tiny sneakers lined up neatly facing the water stayed with me. That afternoon, I went to check the forest perimeter. Every tree seemed closer, more twisted than the day before. Branches scraped the cabin roofs. My boots squished in the mud along the edge of the lake. And again, I heard it. Splashing. Laughter. I froze, every nerve screaming. I thought about the rules. Rule 4. Ignore voices calling from the lake after midnight. But it was daylight. Daylight and still. They were there. I crouched behind a tree and watched. The mist swirled and then I saw them. 2 children, no older than 7 or 8, skipping stones across the lake. They wore faded clothes like decades-old uniforms. Their faces were blurry, almost shifting. One moment, it looked like a boy, the next a girl, and then it was someone else entirely. I whispered their names, though I didn't know them. And they turned. They stared at me, perfectly silent. Then slowly they began to whisper back, voices like a soft breeze. "Eli, come play." My hands shook. I took a step forward, then stopped. Something about their movement was wrong. Too deliberate, too slow, like marionettes. I spun around, heart pounding. And when I looked back, the children were gone. The ripples on the lake remained, but no laughter. No footprints. That night I recorded it. I pressed my phone against the cabin window, hoping to capture even a shadow. The screen showed nothing, just the reflection of my own pale, sweating face. But in the audio playback, faint giggles, whispering, calling my name. I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the cabin felt like tiny feet running along the walls. Every gust of wind sounded like soft whispers from the lake. And in the corner of my mind, I started wondering, had they always been here? The way the forest felt alive, as if watching, it all seemed connected. By morning, I convinced myself it was nothing. My imagination, stress, isolation. But the lake didn't lie. When I went to check, the water's edge was scattered with more shoes. Different ones this time. Sandals, sneakers, a single boot with a broken strap. And fresh footprints, leading nowhere. I called Mr. D again. My voice trembled. "They're here. Children. By the lake. I can see their footprints. You have to send someone. Eli, I told you. No children are here. Stay in the cabins. Follow the rules." He hung up before I could reply. I began to wander the camp, avoiding the lake, but I couldn't escape the feeling that something was behind me, watching me. The mist would part just enough to show a shadow moving between the trees. And then, as I passed the old mess hall, I saw one of the children, standing in the doorway, pale, dripping water from the lake. I froze. The child's eyes were too large, too dark, almost hollow. It tilted its head, smiling. A whisper floated through the air. "You see us now, Eli." I spun around. Empty hall. Just the echo of laughter bouncing through the fog. Over the next few days, I would see them again. On the pier, skipping stones. In the woods, their small hands waving. Shadows flitting across the cabins at dusk. They never spoke in full sentences. Only fragments, riddles, names, and warnings. Rule. Broken. Don't look. Remember, I stopped trying to reason with it. I stopped trying to call Mr. D. I couldn't explain this. And part of me didn't want to, because the forest felt older than me, older than the camp. And the children, they weren't just children. That night, I finally understood. Rule 4. Ignore voices calling from the lake after midnight. They weren't calling for anyone else. They were calling me, and I knew deep down if I answered, there would be no going back. I wasn't supposed to go in. I knew it the second my fingers touched the doorknob. But the door, it was calling me, whispering, promising answers I didn't want, but needed. I had been following the rules, or at least pretending to, avoiding the lake, ignoring the children, never stepping past the cabin's boundaries after sundown. It was exhausting, living in constant vigilance. But curiosity has a way of breaking even the strongest precautions. Cabin 7, the forbidden cabin. Every night it loomed across the field, windows dark, paint peeling, door always closed. The rules were crystal clear. Never enter cabin 7 after sundown. And yet, there I was, standing in front of it, flashlight shaking in my hands, heart hammering like it would burst through my chest. The first time I tried to rationalize it, I told myself, maybe someone left something inside, maybe a stray animal, maybe a clue. But deep down I knew it wasn't rational, not here, not in Ashwood. The door was cold under my hand. The wood groaned when I turned the knob, a sound like bones cracking. I froze for a heartbeat, listening. straining against the forest's oppressive quiet. Then I stepped inside. The air was thick, damp, rotten. My flashlight barely pierced the shadows. The smell of old smoke and mildew burned my nose. And then I saw it. The walls, covered in writing, names, dates, tiny sketches of eyes, hands reaching out, children laughing or crying, I couldn't tell. All of it was fresh, wet ink, moving slightly as though breathing. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the flashlight. That's when I noticed the mirror, small, cracked, leaning against the wall. And I saw a face, not mine, or maybe mine, but wrong. The eyes too wide, too black. The lips stretched in a smile I didn't recognize. I blinked, and it changed. A child's face. No, two children, shadows flickering across the reflection, laughing silently. Then one of them whispered, "You shouldn't be here." I swallowed hard. My knees shook, but I couldn't leave. I felt compelled. My own curiosity had become a leash. I explored further. Old furniture, beds, chairs, toys scattered haphazardly. Every surface had handprints. Tiny ones, cold ones, and then I heard it. The laughter again, coming from behind me. I turned slowly. Empty. Only the wall. Only shadows. But the shadow moved. It slid along the floor, curling around the legs of the furniture, rising toward the ceiling. And I realized it wasn't just a shadow. It was alive, watching, waiting. I tried to leave, but the door slammed shut behind me. No wind, no hands, just shut. Panic surged. I pounded the door, my flashlight swinging wildly. That's when I noticed the diary, old leather-bound, sitting on a desk. I opened it. The handwriting, my handwriting. Every entry was from years ago, describing the same experiences. The children, the rules, cabin 7. And then one line stopped me cold. The caretaker becomes the cabin. I staggered back. My flashlight illuminated something in the corner. A small figure, hunched, shivering, staring at me. A child. No, my reflection again, but wrong. The lips, the eyes, the smile. It was me, and yet it wasn't. "You broke the rule," it whispered. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. My mind raced. I wanted to explain, to apologize, to say I didn't know. But it didn't matter. They were here, all of them, watching, judging. The cabin seemed to stretch, expand. The walls pulsated slightly, like breathing. The air thickened. I could hear footsteps on the roof above me, scratching. Something, or someone, moving in patterns too precise to be random. I stumbled out into the hallway, and that's when I noticed the windows. Outside, the forest pressed closer. The children, no, the shadows, danced in the moonlight, circling the cabin, calling my name. I swear one touched the glass. A hand, small, cold, leaving a streak of frost. I ran. I don't remember how. I don't remember the mud or the rocks cutting into my palms. I just remember breaking the last rule. I looked back, and that's when I saw them all, lined up at the edge of the tree line, watching, waiting, smiling. I made it back to my cabin, slamming the door behind me. My hands shook so violently I could barely write this. My flashlight fell to the floor, and when I picked it up again, I saw it. The rule sheet. 19 lines now. I hadn't counted them before. Line 14 had appeared, freshly inked. 14. Once you see them, you belong to them. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every shadow, every creak of the cabin floor, every whisper outside the window reminded me of what I'd done. I'd broken the rule. I'd entered cabin 7, and now, the children, or whatever they were, knew I was aware. I started hearing voices in my own head, whispers repeating fragments of my past. Memories I didn't remember living. Names I didn't know calling out. My reflection in every dark surface shifted. sometimes showing the cabin's walls behind me instead of the room, sometimes showing the lake, still and fogged. And that's when I realized the worst part. Cabin 7 wasn't just a room. It was a warning, a mirror, a trap, and I had walked straight into it. Now, every step I take is measured. Every glance over my shoulder counts, because I know they're following, waiting, and I can't tell if they are real, or if I'm already part of the rule. All I know is, I broke the one rule I wasn't supposed to touch, and from now on, nothing will be the same. I thought leaving cabin 7 meant I was free, that I could escape the rules. I was wrong. I never left, I just became part of them. The forest presses in closer every day. I wake up to it breathing against the cabin walls, stretching across the clearing, folding the mist like a blanket over the camp. The children, or whatever they are, follow me everywhere. I hear them even when I can't see them. Whispers, giggles, footsteps, splashes on the lake, always at the edge of my vision, vanishing when I look directly. I stop trying to record it. My phone, my camera, whatever I bring, turns black in their presence. Static, distorted audio. Every attempt at proof fails. It's as if the camp itself erases my evidence. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And I know that I am trapped. Mr. D doesn't answer anymore. The phone line is dead, though the number still rings. I've called at every hour, tried every device. All silence. Occasionally, when I pick up, I hear only a whisper, caretaker, and then the line goes dead. I've tried leaving. Walking down the dirt road past the tree line, driving to the highway, but every path loops back to the camp. The forest shifts like it has memory. Every tree is a marker, every fog a wall. I've started to suspect the children are not simply shadows. They are guides, or jailers, or something worse. I see them more clearly now. Not fully, but fragments. Pale faces hovering at the edge of the lake. Their eyes deep hollows, reflecting the moonlight. Sometimes I see them in the cabin windows at night, staring back at me. Sometimes I swear they're inside the walls, always whispering my name. I tried ignoring them once. That night, the forest came to the cabin itself. Branches wrapped against the roof, scratching. Windows fogged from the inside, as though breathing. My reflection in the glass multiplied. Faces, dozens of them, watching. One stepped forward, mimicking my movements perfectly. I realized then the rule wasn't about breaking rules. It was about knowing I could. I keep the rule book close now. Every night I read it aloud, line by line, hoping repetition will make the forest forget me, or at least respect me. But the rules keep changing. New lines appear overnight, always warning, always pointing to me. Rule 15 appeared this morning, scrawled in my handwriting. Caretaker is never alone. Caretaker never leaves. I didn't write that, but somehow I did. The previous caretaker's diary in cabin 7, it was empty now. No pages, no writing, only a single line etched into the leather cover. He is the camp now. I stared at it for hours, shaking. The air hummed with voices. The children, shadows, something indistinct, circling outside, calling my name softly, insistently, impossibly. I talk to them sometimes, whispered confessions, apologies. They do not answer. Not fully, only fragments. Words like rule, broken, caretaker, stay. You belong. The word lingers. It is the only truth here. I've stopped sleeping. Time loses meaning. Hours stretch, days blend. The sun rises and sets behind a wall of fog. Sometimes I see myself in the lake standing on the pier, but when I look closer, it's not me. It's an older version, eyes hollow, lips stretched in a smile I do not recognize. And in the reflection of the water, behind me, the children stand, waiting, watching, smiling. Tonight, I write this from the dining hall. One lantern burns, The rest flicker out of fear, or perhaps respect. I see the shadows shifting in the corners of my eyes, circling. I hear the footsteps, light and careful, pacing outside the windows. I don't know if this is punishment, or reward, or simply nature correcting itself. I can no longer tell the difference between dream and memory, between the forest and the cabin, between the children and myself. Sometimes I hear another caretaker arriving. The path opens, footsteps, keys on the signpost. I stay silent. I can't leave, but I watch. The cycle repeats. The camp needs someone, always someone, and now that someone is me, I whisper to myself, almost as a comfort, follow the rules, survive the forest, listen to the children, but the words twist in my mouth. The rules are no longer lines on paper, they are chains. They are the forest itself, they are me. I sit here, flashlight in hand, writing this because I have to, because the forest is listening, because the shadows are listening, because the children, they never stop watching. When someone arrives, soon, inevitably, they will find the same rules nailed to the door, waiting for them. And maybe, just maybe, they will ignore the warning the way I did. And then they will become the caretaker, and I will still be here, still watching, still whispering, still waiting, because I am Ashwood now, because the rules are older than the camp, and the caretaker never leaves. Story number 3. If you ever stop at a motel off Route 66, and the manager tells you not to ask about room 9, listen to him. I didn't. I was that manager. And I don't even know if I'm alive anymore. I didn't believe her at first. And unless I imagined that night, but the blood was still there in the morning. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to walk into a place and feel it staring back at me. But the moment I stepped onto that cracked asphalt off Route 66, I knew something wasn't right. The sun was bleeding into the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple. I drove past the peeling motel sign, Halpin's Rest, and the letters flickered like a dying neon heartbeat. The air smelled of gasoline and dust, the kind that gets into your lungs and never leaves. I had a lot of questions for Mr. Halpin, but he'd vanished without a trace, leaving me to inherit a place that everyone in town whispered about, but nobody visited. The front doors creaked when I pushed them open, and I half expected them to groan like the bones of the previous occupants. Inside, it smelled like old carpets, cheap air freshener, and something metallic. Something I didn't notice at first, because I wanted to believe it was just rust or a forgotten cleaning spill. That's when I saw it. Behind the front desk, scrawled across the faded yellow wall, were a series of words in a dark, almost black-red ink. I laughed at first. Some prankster, I told myself. Rust, markers. Ha, probably Mr. Halpin's idea of a welcome joke. But the closer I got, the more the letters seemed to pulse, as if they were alive. Rules. Written in a colour that wasn't quite paint, not quite ink. Never rent room 9. If the phone rings after midnight, don't answer. Always replace the flowers in the lobby before dawn. I admit, I smirked. It was absurd. Who even makes rules like this? I ran my finger over the first line and it smeared slightly. Sticky. That's when a chill crept up my spine. The kind that wraps around your rib cage and refuses to let go. Rust, I muttered, louder than I felt. Rust doesn't smell like iron. Doesn't leave a taste in your mouth like copper. I unpacked my few bags in the small office behind the desk, telling the camera, yes, I filmed these confessional videos even then, that I was probably overreacting, that maybe the previous manager was just quirky, eccentric, or missing. I laughed. Nervous laugh, not genuine. The first guest arrived just as the sun dipped completely behind the horizon. He was tall, unremarkable in appearance. wearing a leather jacket and an expression that didn't quite meet his eyes. He asked about room 9. I froze. I told him it was unavailable. He frowned, persistent, and I hesitated longer than I should have. I lied to him. Sorry, that room's under maintenance, I said, my voice cracking slightly. He nodded slowly, like he knew something I didn't. He didn't push further, but there was a weight in the air, a kind of silent accusation that made my stomach turn. I checked the camera feeds after he went upstairs. Nothing unusual, just the humming fluorescent lights and the long, empty hallway that seemed longer in the dark. I told myself it was all in my head, that I was imagining the stories I'd heard in town, the disappearances, the whispers, the rules no one followed. I wanted to believe that. By 3 a.m., I heard the soft knock on the office door. My heart jumped. The phone rang, shrill, shrieking against the quiet motel. My hand hovered over it, remembering the rules scrawled in red behind the desk. I told the audience I didn't answer. I didn't. I couldn't. Morning came too quickly, soft light spilling through dusty blinds. I went upstairs to check on room 9. The door was closed. I knocked. Silence. Slowly I turned the knob. The room was empty, nothing but the faint smell of iron, sharp and heavy, and on the bathroom mirror, written in a smear of red that hadn't been there the night before, were 3 words: "You broke the rules." I stumbled back, the camera shaking in my hands. I tell the audience I didn't see it before cleaning. I want to believe that, but there's a pause I can't skip over when I record. The pause where my eyes drift back to the mirror, the writing, the pulsing red that seems alive. I remember the metallic taste in my mouth, the way my chest tightened, my knees weak as I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe I imagined it after a long night. I can't remember anymore. Or maybe I'm lying to you, to myself. By the time the sun fully rose, the lobby looked normal. Dust motes danced in the golden light. The desk was neat. The flowers, freshly replaced, as if they'd always been there. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that the motel had watched me all night. Patient and waiting, recording every decision, every hesitation. I sit here now, filming this first confession, my hands trembling, trying to convince myself that tomorrow I'll manage it better, that the rules are just words, that room 9 is just a room, and that the blood, if it was blood, isn't a message, it's a warning to me. And I know, deep down, that when the next guest asks about room 9, I won't be able to stop myself from saying yes, because curiosity always wins. I thought I was done with the rules. I thought room 9 was a one-time mistake, but then she arrived, Clara, and the moment I saw her, I knew she didn't belong, or maybe I never did. It was a rainy night, the kind where the asphalt glistened and reflected the flickering neon sign in jagged, trembling lines. The storm outside made the motel seem alive, like it was breathing under the weight of thunder. I had finished logging the day's visitors, convincing myself that the previous guest in room 9 was just a fluke, an anomaly. Then the door creaked open. She stepped in quietly, as though she'd walked into the motel every night for years. Pale, almost ethereal, her dark hair plastered to her face from the rain. Her eyes scanned the lobby with an unnerving calm, and she stopped directly in front of me. "Do you still replace the flowers?" she asked, her voice soft, almost melodic. I blinked, hesitated. "I don't know you," I told myself. "You aren't real. You're a figment, a trick of exhaustion." Yet the camera captured every tremor in my hands. I forced a laugh. Yeah, of course," I said, the lie tasting bitter. She smiled faintly, like she knew more than she should. And then she did something that made my stomach drop. She finished my sentence. You put them in the vase before dawn. Always. I froze, staring at her, heart pounding like a jackhammer. My narration falters here every time I watch the footage. I insist I'd never met her before, that I'm imagining it, but deep down, memories start to bleed through, unbidden and fragmented. I see a silhouette in the rain, months ago, whispering behind the glass door of room 9. That same soft voice, impossibly familiar. Did she follow me here? Or had I been hearing it all along, trapped in that room, haunted by my own guilt? I can't remember clearly, and I don't think I want to. We sat in the small office behind the desk with mugs of steaming coffee, the kind that burns your fingers if you're not careful. She didn't ask for a room number, didn't ask for an ID, didn't even glance at the registration book. She just sipped her coffee, observing me. You think you're the manager, she said finally. But this place decides who stays. Her words hit like ice in my chest. I laughed, nervously, the kind of laugh that makes you sound crazy even to yourself. That's a little dramatic, don't you think? I asked. But the tremor in my voice betrayed me. As if on cue, the phone shrieked, cutting through the quiet. Midnight. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not with her sitting there, staring at me with that impossible calm, as if she'd been waiting for that exact moment. The camera captured my shaking hand hovering over the receiver, the sweat on my brow, and the mounting panic I refused to admit out loud. The storm outside intensified. Lightning cracked against the motel's rusted roof, the sound echoing like something metal being torn apart. Clara didn't flinch. I wanted to ask her if she was real, if she had always been there, but my tongue felt heavy, paralyzed. Morning came, sluggish and grey, the storm fading into drizzle. I forced myself to walk into the lobby. My eyes went first to the flowers I had replaced the night before. They were blackened, curling in on themselves like something had poisoned them while I slept. And then I saw it. On the wall behind the front desk, where the old rules had been written, fresh red seeped over the faded letters. New words crawled through the old ones, twisting, rearranging themselves. 1. Never speak of her. 2. Follow the rules, even if you forget. I swear to the camera, I cleaned it immediately. I scrubbed, wiped, and left nothing but a faint smear. Yet I never touched it. Not really. The writing, the smell of iron, the way the red seemed to pulse under the paint. It wasn't meant to be cleaned. I tell the audience I don't know what to make of her, that she vanished before I could even ask for a name. But then, the footage shows her reflection in the window, smiling faintly, just for a moment. I look back at the monitor, my hands trembling. Did she leave, or had she always been behind me? Every time I speak to the camera, I try to frame it as coincidence, as if she were merely a guest, a visitor, a trick of exhaustion and stress. But the truth is, I feel her even now, watching me, waiting. And deep in the pit of my chest, I know that room 9 isn't finished. I try to end this segment with a joke, something light-hearted to break the tension. But the words die in my throat. I'm not laughing. Not really. The motel seems alive, almost sentient, whispering through the wind that rattles the broken windows. The rules aren't just words. They're promises. Promises that I can't break without consequences. And Clara is part of them. Or maybe she is the rules. I don't know anymore. I look at the camera, voice low, almost pleading. If you're driving down Route 66 and you see a motel with flickering lights, if you ever meet her, just don't stay in room 9, or answer the phone, or touch the flowers, just leave. I step back from the desk. The storm has cleared. the clouds pulling away into a grey morning sky. But the red, the smell, the pulse of the writing behind the desk, it's still there, waiting. I know the motel isn't done with me, and I know deep down that the next guest will come, and I won't be ready. The appearance of Clara escalates the psychological tension and foreshadows supernatural influence. Ethan's unstable narration and denial deepen. The next chapter introduces outside scrutiny, the highway inspector and police officer, and further blurs reality with unexplained phenomena and fresh blood, setting the stage for Ethan's unraveling. I thought I had seen everything. I thought the rules, the blood, and Clara were the worst this place could throw at me. But that night, when the inspector arrived, I realized the motel doesn't just watch, it reports. It was quiet for a few days after Clara vanished. Quiet enough that I convinced myself she had been a hallucination, a product of too many late nights and too much coffee. I tried to clean the lobby, wipe the smears of red behind the desk, and reassure myself that room 9 was empty. Just a room, nothing more. But then, on a morning damp with fog, 2 cars rolled into the parking lot. A highway inspector and a police officer stepped out. They introduced themselves formally, clipboard in hand, badges glinting. Their presence immediately made my stomach turn. I smiled for the camera, narrating as if nothing was wrong, saying I welcomed their visit. But every step they took toward the office, every glance at the walls, seemed like a silent accusation. The inspector, a tall man with sharp eyes, didn't waste time. "We're here about the missing travelers," he said, voice low, professional. "We've had several reports about this motel," I stammered, fumbling for words. "Reports? Mistakes, I mean, miscommunications," I muttered. My narration cracks here in the recording. I tell the audience I was calm, collected, but the footage shows my hand shaking as I handed over the logbook. The officer glanced at room 9, then back at me. "Have you ever rented this room after the previous owner disappeared?" I froze, swallowing hard. I lied. "No, never. I've kept it closed for months." The camera captured the lie perfectly. The way my eyes flickered to the desk, the way my fingers twitched nervously. Because I had rented it. Twice. And the motel knew. As they walked the halls, I insisted everything was normal. But the scratches under the front desk, barely noticeable, seemed to move under their gaze. I told the camera they were just from rats. The audience can see how I avoid looking at the spots, how my voice rises when I insist it's nothing. Then the inspector's voice dropped. "We've received calls. Guests claim the manager isn't always here. Sometimes he appears, sometimes not." I laughed nervously. "I'm always here," I said, probably just misremembering. But the camera shows me looking over my shoulder, the hair on my neck standing up. That night, I replayed the security footage in the office, alone after they left. And that's when it got worse. On the monitor, I was seen standing alone in the lobby, talking, but no one was there. No Clara, no guest, just me, moving my lips, gesturing, as if reciting a conversation I didn't remember. I rewinded, frame by frame, and the blood behind the desk, the rules, had changed. Words twisted, dark red letters forming new instructions. "Don't show them the recordings." 2. Hide the flowers. I swear I never touched it. I never even looked directly. And yet the rules knew. They knew what I was thinking before I thought it. I tried to tell the camera it was paranoia, exhaustion, the stress of the investigation. But every time I speak, I can't hide the truth. I see things out of the corner of my eye. A reflection of Clara in the office window, her pale face barely visible before vanishing. The sound of her soft voice whispering from the empty hall. He knows. I attempted to leave the office. The hallway was longer than I remembered, doors stretching into shadows. The lights flickered like dying hearts, and on the wall near room 9, the smears of red glistened in the dim glow, fresh and pulsating. Words I didn't write appeared. Show them nothing. 4. Follow the rules or join them. I step back, my hands shaking, my breath shallow. I tell the audience I don't understand, that maybe it's a trick of the eyes, a product of stress, but I can feel the motel press against me, pressing questions I don't dare answer. The inspector called me later that evening to clarify details. Were there any unusual occurrences? He asked. I laughed again, hiding the tremor. Unusual? No, sir, just routine maintenance. I didn't tell him about the blood, about Clara, about the words rewriting themselves. I didn't even admit I was afraid, not fully. The night dragged on. The phone rang again, shrill and insistent. I didn't answer. The flowers in the lobby, left untouched since the morning, wilted overnight, black and curling as if scorched. The rules had shifted again, new words emerging from old ones. I record myself saying I cleaned it, wiped it away, but the footage shows I never touched it. By the end of that night, I sat alone in the office, staring at the monitor, my hands trembling. The camera is on, capturing every twitch, every hesitant breath. I tell myself, I tell the audience, that the inspector and the officer are gone, that they didn't see what I saw. But I know better. The motel hides its secrets until it chooses to reveal them. And I can't tell who it wants me to warn, them or me. And as I record my final confession for the night, I whisper to the camera, if you ever drive down Route 66 and this motel looks empty, if you see the flicker of lights behind the windows, don't knock, don't check in. The motel watches. It waits, and it writes its own rules. And sometimes it even checks you. I stand up, my shadow stretching across the hallway, and glance at room 9. The door remains closed, silent, but I know it isn't empty. I know it has never been empty, and I know the inspector didn't leave without seeing the motel exactly as it wanted him to. Tomorrow it will come for me. The inspection heightens Ethan's psychological tension, showing both external scrutiny and supernatural influence. The motel now actively manipulates events, and Ethan's unreliability deepens. The next chapter will reveal Clara's connection to the previous manager and the ultimate consequences of breaking the rules. Driving toward the climactic horror, I thought the inspection would be the worst night. I thought the blood, the rules, Clara, that was the peak. But I was wrong. The motel had one final lesson, and it was mine to learn. The days after the inspection blurred into one long grey haze. I kept filming myself, narrating as though I was recording a documentary, but every word came out shaky, uncertain, my voice betraying the fear I tried to hide. I told the audience that I was in control, that nothing could touch me, that room 9 had remained empty since Clara left. I lied. It started subtly. The wind rattled the broken neon sign at exactly 3:33 a.m. The flowers in the lobby, which I'd replaced with trembling hands, wilted overnight, curling black and dripping water like tears. The rules behind the front desk shifted again. New lines appeared, forming in the same dark red. Replace the manager when the time comes. 2. Keep the guests unaware. I stared at them, whispering to the camera that it must be mold, must be some chemical reaction, must be anything but the truth. Yet deep down, I felt it, an unseen presence pressing into my chest, whispering, judging, deciding what I could and could not say. Then came the comments. I had started uploading the videos, hoping to warn travelers, to exorcise some of the guilt, to perhaps make sense of everything. But the comments were strange, unsettling. Some claimed they had stayed at the motel last week, met me in person, even had coffee in the office. Others insisted the motel had been abandoned for years. My viewers were confusing reality, past and present, and I realized I couldn't even trust the timeline anymore. It was during one of these late-night recordings that I finally admitted the truth, or as much as I could handle. Clara wasn't just a guest. She was the daughter of Mr. Halpin, the previous manager, who had vanished after he broke the rules. I speak this quietly, almost like confessing to myself. She had been trapped in room 9, hidden behind walls, silent for months. I can still remember finding her remains, small, fragile bones wrapped in the damp insulation. The air in the room smelled of decay and iron. My hands shook so violently that I could barely lift the camera. I tell the audience that I didn't touch the writing, that I didn't rearrange the rules, but the footage shows my fingers brushing the wall, smearing the dark red lines in ways I don't recall. That night, the phone rang again. I didn't answer. The echo of the previous rings haunted me, a rhythmic reminder that the motel controlled the flow of time, of events, of people. I spoke into the camera, my voice low, confessional, trembling. The rules are still here. The flowers still die. Room 9 still waits, and I don't know how long I have left before it decides I stay too long. The storm outside worsened. Rain lashing the windows, wind rattling the broken neon. And then I saw it, the shadow, not Clara's shadow, not my own, but a figure moving behind the lobby desk, just barely visible in the reflection of the glass. It was taller, broader, its presence undeniable. I froze. My mouth opened, tried to speak, but only a whisper emerged. You knew this would happen. I spun the camera toward the desk. Nothing. Empty. Silent. Yet I could feel it. The weight of someone. Something standing just behind me, watching. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I told the audience that I was alone, that nothing was there. But my eyes betrayed the lie. I realized then, in a way I had refused to acknowledge until this moment, that the motel was alive. Not alive like a building, not alive like a house that groaned under age, but alive in a way that was aware, sentient, patient. It observed, judged, and enforced. Every rule broken, every guest misled, every hesitation recorded. It was all written into the walls in that dark, unrelenting red. I spoke to the camera one last time, my hands shaking, voice cracking. If you ever drive down Route 66 and see Halpin's Rest, don't stop. Don't even glance at the sign. Don't answer the phone. Don't replace the flowers. And for God's sake, don't stay in room 9. The wind shrieked like a chorus of voices through the broken windows. My shadow stretched along the hallway. I felt the presence behind me again, stronger, warmer, almost welcoming. And then I understood. The motel had been waiting for me. The rules were not guidelines. They were contracts. And I, Ethan Ward, manager, witness, survivor, was not here by chance. The camera captures my last words, whispered almost inaudibly. I don't know who will watch this. I don't know if anyone will understand, but the motel decides who stays. I turned slowly, drawn to the front desk, to the blood-written rules. The writing shimmered, pulsing as if alive. I reached out, not in defiance, not in curiosity, but because I had no choice. The shadows moved closer, and then the screen went black. No sound, no movement, just silence. The last frame of the recording, the one I leave for the viewers, shows the rules behind the desk, perfectly intact, with one new line scrawled beneath them. The manager stays, and in that moment, I understood. Room 9 wasn't just a room. The motel wasn't just a building. I wasn't a manager. I was its next tenant. Ethan's confession ends ambiguously, leaving viewers unsettled. The motel claims him. The audience is left questioning what was real, what was supernatural, and whether Ethan's unreliability masks his guilt or the motel's malevolent intent. Story number 6. They told me the rules were simple. Lock the doors at midnight, never look at the mirrors, and if you hear someone knocking after 3 a.m., don't answer. But no one warned me the rules would start changing. I wasn't supposed to be here. Not really. But the road out of town doesn't exactly have signs that say, safe places ahead. I needed a job. I needed a place to hide. And somehow, a tiny gas station in the Nevada desert, with its flickering fluorescent lights and a manager who looked like he hadn't seen sunlight in decades, felt like the perfect escape. Earl was waiting when I arrived. He didn't shake my hand, didn't smile. He just leaned against the counter, his eyes shadowed beneath that old baseball cap, and muttered, "The rules aren't suggestions. Follow them or, well, just follow them." I nodded, though I didn't really know what them were. That was my first mistake. The crumpled piece of paper under the counter, taped there with yellowed Scotch tape, listed a few dozen rules in uneven handwriting. Some were mundane. Keep the bathroom clean. Check the pumps every hour. But others were stranger. Lock all doors at midnight. Never answer a knock after 3 a.m. Don't look at the mirrors when the lights flicker. I laughed nervously, thinking it a joke. Or maybe the eccentricity of a manager who spent too long in the desert heat. I didn't laugh when the radio crackled. It started with static, then a voice. My own voice maybe, but it was different. I think it's... No, don't touch that. I froze, the plastic handle of the coffee pot slipping in my hand. That was me. That morning, hours ago, in a motel 2 towns back. My words exactly. But why were they coming from the radio? Earl, of course, was nowhere to be found. I glanced at the clock on the wall. It didn't move. 2:17, 2:17, 2:17. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. Maybe the desert night had fried my brain. Maybe the exhaustion was worse than I thought. But the longer I stared at that frozen clock, the more I felt like it was staring back, like it knew. I made my way outside just to clear my head, letting the cold night air bite through my thin jacket. The pumps were empty, no cars in sight, nothing moving except the faint shimmer of heat waves over the asphalt. And yet, I swear I saw movement in the corner of my eye, just a shadow too fast to catch, disappearing behind the corner of the building. Inside, Earl appeared, as if summoned by my own fear. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask how I was settling in. He just set a clipboard on the counter and stared at me. "Don't think too much. Just follow the list," he said, voice flat, but his eyes, I don't know, they were sharp, alert, like he'd been expecting me to fail before the night even started. I wanted to ask him what he meant, but the words stuck in my throat. There was something about the way he leaned on the counter, like a predator waiting for a misstep. I poured a cup of coffee, trying to ignore the whispers from the radio. The voices were quiet now, almost like the hum of the static, but I could still make out fragments. My own words again, conversations I didn't remember having, or maybe didn't want to remember. I checked the mirrors, just to follow the rules. Nothing unusual, except that my reflection, it blinked slower than I did. I blinked again. It blinked once more, dragging out the motion. I shook my head, laughed nervously. "Just tired," I muttered to myself. The rest of the night passed in a blur of mundane tasks and quiet dread. I filled shelves, checked pumps, made sure the little bell above the door hadn't rung for hours. And yet, the air felt heavy, like the building itself was breathing around me. I thought about calling someone, anyone, but my phone had no signal. Nothing worked out here except the lights, the pumps, and the radio that occasionally reminded me of things I'd tried to forget, things I shouldn't have remembered. By the time dawn started creeping across the horizon, I had convinced myself of two things. One, that the voices were just echoes of my own paranoia. Two, that Earl was harmless, just another desert oddity. But then I saw it. A single scribbled line added to the list of rules, in handwriting that wasn't Earl's, not mine. If you leave before 2:17, it will follow you. I froze. The radio was silent now, but I could almost hear it in my head. The clock still read 2:17. I couldn't remember if it had ever moved. I couldn't remember anything clearly. The desert stretched outside, empty and silent, but I felt eyes on me, always watching, waiting. I locked the doors at midnight. I avoided the mirrors when the lights flickered. I didn't answer the knocks that never came, and I swear, something inside me knew that following the rules wasn't protection. It was survival, and survival meant hiding the truth, even from myself. By the time the sun broke the horizon, I was exhausted, but I had a strange, sinking certainty. Tonight, the rules would change, and I would be here, waiting. I woke up that night already knowing something had changed. The desert wind had shifted, colder this time, sharper, like it carried whispers across the asphalt. The gas stations smelled the same, faint gasoline, dust, and something else I couldn't place, a metallic tang that made my stomach knot. But when I slid the cracked Scotch tape off the counter and unfolded the list of rules, my pulse caught in my throat. There were new ones. If someone calls asking for you by name, hang up. The handwriting was shaky, almost childlike, but it wasn't mine. It wasn't Earl's. I didn't know whose it was. I laughed quietly to myself, the kind of laugh that comes when you're already scared. Of course, I thought, a prank. Desert heat will do that to you. But no, I hadn't even finished that thought when the phone rang. I froze. It was the rotary phone behind the counter, the one I hadn't touched since yesterday. The receiver lifted itself slightly, like a hand tugging at me, and then it rang again. Sharp, persistent. I swallowed hard, trying to convince myself it was just a wiring issue, a coincidence. But then the voice came. You shouldn't have come back. It was soft, barely a whisper, like the kind of voice that creeps under your skin. My hands trembled, and for a moment I thought it might be Earl, until I realized Earl was in the storage room, humming a tune I didn't recognize. Who is this? I whispered back, my voice sounding strange in the empty store. Silence. Then, a pause long enough for my heart to hammer in panic. Then the same words. You shouldn't have come back. I hung up before the second sentence finished. My hands shook for so long I had to set the receiver down on the counter, hoping it would stop ringing. It didn't. It hummed, vibrated, moved somewhere between the static and the hum of the fluorescent lights above. I told myself I had never met the woman. I never met her. That's what I said to the camera, what I would have said if someone were watching, and yet every time I heard her voice on the radio, this time a different station, a crackling frequency I swear didn't exist before. I felt a memory crawling up my spine. Lila. Please. The name made my blood run cold. Lila. I hadn't said that name in, I can't even remember how long, and yet the image came back anyway. A car, the dashboard smeared with red, her hand resting limply on the passenger seat. Her eyes, those wide, terrified eyes, staring at me. I tried to shake it off, telling the audience, I've never met her. I don't know who she is. But even as I said it, my voice faltered. The crack in my tone betrayed me, because deep down, I remembered. The desert night grew heavier, the shadows in the corners of the gas station stretching unnaturally, like they were listening. I could hear the radio, low at first, then louder, a chorus of whispers calling my name, accusing me. The voices overlapped with my own thoughts, until I couldn't tell if I was remembering or dreaming. I started flipping through the other rules, desperate for something familiar. Most were the same, but a few had changed. Never leave the counter when the lights flicker. Ignore the shadows. Even if they speak, I wanted to scream at the paper, curse whoever was doing this, but my voice caught again. I couldn't, because I wasn't alone. Or maybe I was. I couldn't tell anymore. The clock ticked, or maybe it didn't. It didn't matter. Time didn't seem to move past 2:17. Just like last night, the radio whispers crescendoed, and I pressed my ear to the receiver, hoping to make sense of the static. Lila. Why? I stumbled back, my fingers tangling in the phone cord. My own voice came out in fragments, desperate. I didn't mean to. The memories were back in full now, unwilling to hide. The accident, the tires screeching on wet asphalt, the flash of headlights in the rearview mirror, the sound of metal crumpling, and then silence, except for her whisper, faint but accusing. Why? I could feel the guilt pressing against my chest, my lungs tightening as if the room itself was punishing me. I wanted to run, to drive back down the desert highway, but even if I left, the voice promised it would follow, and maybe it would. Maybe it always had. Earl appeared behind me without a sound, like he had been there the entire time. His expression was calm, too calm. You're hearing it again, he said. Not a question, not a warning, just a statement. And I realized he wasn't here to help. He was observing, waiting, judging. I asked him, my voice trembling, "Do you hear her too?" He didn't answer. He only shook his head slowly, smiling in that strange way that made my stomach churn. Some rules change for you. Some rules test you, test me. That's what he called it. And I wanted to ask, test me for what? But I didn't. I couldn't. Because deep down I already knew. The night stretched on, long and silent, punctuated only by the sporadic whispers of the radio. Each time I thought I could catch a breath. The voices rose again, calling her name, accusing, reminding me of the blood on my hands. By the time the sky started to lighten, I knew two things for certain. The rules weren't static. They changed for me. They were reacting. And Lila, she wasn't gone. She was here, in the frequencies, in the shadows, in my mind. And somehow, she always would be. I locked the doors. I avoided the mirrors. I didn't touch the phone. But even as I sat behind the counter, trembling, I felt the weight of the night settle over me. And I knew, with a certainty that terrified me, that the next shift would bring something worse. I knew the rules were changing for me. I didn't know why, but I felt it the second I stepped back into the gas station. The desert wind carried a strange scent tonight. Smoke, iron, and something unplaceable. I flipped the list of rules over like a nervous tick, and there it was, written in jagged, almost angry handwriting I didn't recognize. Don't talk to Earl after midnight. I laughed nervously because what the hell did that mean? I'd been talking to him for hours already. I looked over my shoulder, and there he was, leaning in the doorway to the storage room like a shadow carved from the desert night. His cap was low, but I swear I could see his eyes, watching, waiting. Midnight was still 30 minutes away. But when the clock flickered to 11:59, something in the air shifted. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead and then dimmed, pulsing like a heartbeat. Shadows pooled in the corners, thicker than they should have been, moving almost imperceptibly toward me. I tried to tell myself it was fatigue, that my mind was replaying Lila's voice and the accident, but deep down I knew it wasn't. The phone rang. Again. Not the rotary. This time, it came from the cordless one behind the counter. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The voice from the night before whispered faintly through the static, "You should have stayed away." And then Earl stepped forward. Quiet. Too quiet. My heart hammered against my ribs. He held something in his hands. Blood. Not his own, though I didn't want to think about whose it was. The red streaked down his fingers, dripping onto the floor with a wet, slow hiss. "You see it now, don't you?" he said, voice low, almost teasing, though the fear curling in my stomach told me this was no joke. I stammered. "What is happening?" Earl smiled, or at least I think he did. In the dim light, his face was impossible to read. "You've been here before. All of this." Every night, I laughed, a high, brittle sound because... No, that wasn't possible. I hadn't. I couldn't have. And yet something in my mind, a memory or a hallucination, clicked. There he was, lying on the floor, again and again. I remembered bending over him once, trying to stop the blood, shaking, pleading, thinking I could fix it. But it never worked. I never got it right. "You're lying," I said, voice rising. "You're insane." He shook his head slowly, almost sadly. "I'm not lying. You're the one who doesn't remember, or refuses to." The lights flickered, shadows dancing across the walls. I backed into the counter, my hands scraping the edge. The radio crackled, then a voice whispered, "Hers. Lila. Why? Why did you leave me?" The room swayed. I could see her reflected in the mirrors now, just for a second. Not the mirrors on the wall, but the ones in my memory. Her eyes wide, accusing, her hand reaching for me even though I wasn't there. Or was I? I couldn't tell anymore. Earl advanced. "Rule 13, he said simply. "You broke it the moment you walked in." My stomach sank. What rule?" He didn't answer, only pointed toward the surveillance monitor above the counter. I turned, stomach dropping. The grainy footage showed me, over and over, standing behind the counter, panicking, trembling, and over again, Earl's body hitting the floor, blood pooling, fading, rewinding, looping. I was watching myself in a nightmare I didn't understand, trapped in some impossible time cycle. The radio's static spiked. Lila's voice called again, desperate and fragile. "Help me." And then I realized this was my doing. Every time the rules changed, every night, every shift, I was the reason. I had left her. I had killed her. I had left Earl to clean up the pieces. Or maybe he had tried to stop me and failed. Maybe he was trying to teach me, to punish me, to make me remember. I wanted to run. I wanted to leave. But the doors, they wouldn't open. The shadows weren't shadows. They were watching, waiting. And somewhere in the pulsing air, in the flicker of the lights, I could hear the desert itself whispering, "Shift starts again." I grabbed the list, searching desperately for some rule I had missed, something I could follow to fix this. But the paper burned under my fingers, curling, changing words, becoming new rules as I read. Do not leave until the echo answers. Do not speak her name unless you want to see her again. I whispered her name anyway, Lila. And for a second, everything stopped. The lights froze, the shadows halted, and then the radio exploded in sound. Her voice, mine, static, Earl screaming, the clock ticking. 2:17 again. I stumbled back, my knees hitting the tile floor, my hands clutching my head. Earl's voice was calm above it all. "You're learning, slowly, but tonight will change. You'll see the next rule soon enough." And before I could ask what he meant, the lights cut out completely. The station was black, the desert outside silent, except for the whispers, always the whispers. I sat there, shaking, listening to the echoes of voices I could barely recognize, trying to convince myself it wasn't real, trying to convince myself I hadn't done it, that I wasn't trapped in some endless punishment of my own making. But deep down, I knew the truth. The rules weren't just rules, they were tests, and I was failing every single night. I woke before the desert sky even began to lighten, my body trembling from a night I couldn't call sleep. The gas station smelled the same, faint gasoline, dust, and that iron tang that always reminded me of her. Lila. I hadn't said her name aloud in years, or at least I tried not to, but it haunted me now, like smoke curling from a fire I could never put out. The list of rules had changed again. I didn't need to touch it to know. I could feel it before I even reached the counter, the paper stiffening as if it had grown its own life overnight. One line, freshly scrawled in something dark, almost burned into the paper. "Tell them the truth this time." I froze. My hands clenched the counter. The coffee I'd poured spilled onto the tile floor, steaming faintly, curling into shapes that looked like hands reaching for me. I didn't move. I couldn't move. The station was silent, eerily silent, but the shadows clung to the corners like thick oil. The radio hummed softly at first, then a low, deliberate crackle. Her voice. Lila, calling my name. Not accusing, not pleading, just there. And then another voice. Earl, or was it? "It's time," it said, calm, measured. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I realized something I hadn't faced before. The rules, the voices, the shifting lists. They weren't punishment. Not exactly. They were a mirror, and when I looked at them, I could see myself. All of it. The accident, the silence after, the way I had left her in the car, left her alone. I sank to the floor behind the counter, gripping the edges as if it were the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. My reflection in the cracked glass of the register stared back at me. I blinked, and it blinked later, always wrong. The first confession slipped past my lips before I even realized I was speaking. I was driving. It was raining. I didn't see her until I stopped. My hands were shaking. My voice was hoarse. I didn't mean to. The radio hissed, cutting me off. Then came the whispering chorus. Fragments of my own words, my own excuses, all replayed in distorted echoes. And then the line on the list burned before my eyes, changing. Tell them everything, or don't leave. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run into the desert and pretend this night, and every night before it, wasn't real. But the doors wouldn't budge. The shadows weren't shadows. They moved toward me, stretching along the floor like black water, crawling up the walls, pooling in the corners. The desert itself seemed to lean in through the cracked windows. Earl appeared behind me. His eyes were impossibly calm, though streaks of red smeared his shirt. Blood, maybe, maybe not. I didn't dare check. "You've been hiding," he said, voice low, almost disappointed. "From her, from me, from yourself." I shook my head, backing into the counter. No, I didn't." "You did," he interrupted. "And you will again, unless you tell the truth." I swallowed hard, staring at the mirrors. My reflection shifted. Not me. Lila, her eyes wide, accusing. Her lips moving in silence, mouthing the words I didn't want to hear. Why? I wanted to run. I wanted to cover my ears, cover my eyes, cover my heart. But the truth was crawling out of me anyway, unstoppable, spilling over like ink on wet paper. It was an accident, I whispered, tears running down my cheeks. I didn't see her. I lost control. The radio cut off. Silence. Then one final whisper. Tell them everything. Now. I collapsed to the floor. My hands shook so violently I couldn't hold my head up. And then it all came back. The headlights, the wet asphalt, the sound of metal twisting, the smell of blood, the way she looked at me, every detail I had buried deep, every memory I had tried to deny. It was all here, all of it. Earl crouched in front of me. Some rules aren't meant to be broken, he said softly. Some rules are meant to teach. His hand hovered over the counter, but I didn't flinch. I was too tired, too broken, I spoke again. I didn't want it to happen. I didn't mean it. I couldn't. My voice broke completely. I left her to die. I drove away, and I came here to hide. The radio crackled one last time. Her voice soft now, almost forgiving. I see you, finally. And then the lights cut out. The station went black. I was alone, or maybe I wasn't. The shadows pooled, the desert pressed in, and I felt the weight of every shift, every rule, every night pressing down on me. I didn't move. I couldn't. I knew the truth now, but knowing it didn't mean I was free. I knew the rules weren't done, and I knew the shift would start again. The clock on the wall ticked, or maybe it didn't. I stared at it, shaking, as the radio whispered in static and echoes, "Shift starts again." And in that moment I realized the truth was never enough. Not here, not for me. Story number 1, you ever had to follow rules that didn't make sense, but you followed them anyway. Because deep down, you knew if you broke even one, something would come for you. I broke rule number 3 last week, and now, the thing in room 9 won't stop whispering my name. You ever work a job so quiet that you start hearing your own heartbeat in the walls? That's what the night shift at Blackridge Lodge feels like. A heartbeat, slow and heavy, echoing through the wooden ribs of a building that should have died a long time ago. They told me the pay was good because of the isolation. No distractions, the manager Mara said during the interview. You'll just keep the fire going, log guest check-ins, and follow the rules. I thought she meant company policy. You know, no smoking inside, no pets, no parties. But when I arrived that first night, she handed me a yellowed sheet of paper, wrinkled from years of thumbtacks and nervous fingers. At the top, in red marker, it said, "Rules for the night clerk. Never look out the back window after midnight. If a guest arrives during a snowstorm, do not check them in. Never leave the lobby before dawn. If you hear knocking after 3 a.m., don't answer. It's not the guests. Keep the radio on channel 7. Always." I laughed. I really did. I thought maybe Mara was playing some local joke on the new guy. But her eyes didn't move when I laughed. They just stayed fixed on mine. Cold grey eyes. They're not jokes, Eli. The rules keep the lodge quiet. Quiet. That word stuck with me. The first 2 nights passed easy enough. Empty halls, the hum of the space heater, and the low crackle of the radio static on channel 7. The lodge sat halfway up a Colorado mountain, surrounded by pines so tall they blocked out the stars. There were only 6 rooms, each numbered in brass so tarnished it looked like dried blood. Most nights, all the keys hung neatly behind the desk, untouched. But that third night, the one I'm telling you about, something changed. It started around midnight. The power dipped, lights flickering like someone was breathing through the wires. I remember checking the clock, 12:03 a.m., and my eyes drifted to the back window, the one overlooking the frozen lake. The moonlight pressed through the glass in thin, fractured lines. I thought about the first rule. Never look out the back window after midnight. Of course, I looked. The snow was falling in that slow, heavy way where every flake seems to pause mid-air. The lake was just a sheet of ice, smooth as glass, but there was a shape, dark, unmoving, at the far end of the dock. I blinked, leaned closer. Gone. Probably a tree shadow, I told myself, or my reflection. Still, I pulled the curtains shut. Mara's voice crackled through the radio a minute later. "Everything all right, Eli?" "Yeah," I said, just the lights flickering again. "Don't open the back curtains after midnight," she replied, tone flat. I didn't. That was the first lie I told her. Hours crawled by. Around 2, the storm started. Snow hammering the windows, wind shrieking through the chimney. I made coffee, half listening to the static hum of Channel 7. Every so often, I thought I heard voices in it, like snippets of old conversations buried in the noise. Then came the bell. The small brass bell on the counter, the one no one had touched in days, rang once. A clear, sharp ding. I froze. I hadn't heard the front door open, no footsteps on the wood floor, just that sound. When I looked up, someone stood in the doorway. A man, mid-40s maybe, snow dripping from his coat, boots soaked, breath clouding the air. He didn't speak right away, just stared at me, blinking slowly, like he was remembering how to be human. "Car broke down," he said finally. "Can I get a room?" My first thought wasn't how did he get here, but rule number 2, never check in a guest during a snowstorm. The storm outside was violent now, whiteouts swallowing the porch light. "We're, closed for the season," I lied. "I'll pay cash." He reached into his coat, pulling out a thick, wet wad of bills. His hand shook slightly, or maybe it was mine. I looked toward the key rack. Every tag hung in place, except room 9. I could have sworn I saw it there earlier. I blinked and it was gone. "You sure we haven't met before?" I asked. "You always say that," he replied. That sentence shouldn't have chilled me like it did, but something about the way he said it, casual, like it wasn't the first time we'd had this conversation, made my throat go dry. Still, I gave him the form to fill out, standard info, name, address, phone number. He wrote something down, signed, and handed it back. When I looked, the ink was smeared, the name unreadable. Just a stain across the page, like someone had dragged a wet finger through it. The lights flickered again. When they came back, he was already walking down the hallway, boots echoing on the floorboards. I called after him. "Hey, you need a key." But he didn't stop, just turned the corner toward room 9. I stared at the guest book. My hand trembled as I flipped back a few pages. There were old names, travelers, hikers, couples, but none in the last 3 months. The last entry before his was dated December 10th. Mara's handwriting. I checked the date on the clock. December 10th. The pen slipped from my fingers. The air in the room felt too thick, like the walls were closing in. I turned to the radio, twisting the knob to clear the static. But all I heard was a faint whisper, my own voice, repeating, "You shouldn't have looked out the window." The coffee mug shattered in my hand. Somewhere down the hall, a door clicked shut. Room 9, I waited for Mara to radio again, for anyone to break the silence. But the only thing that answered was the wind pressing against the glass. And under it, something else. A soft, deliberate knock, 3 times. I didn't move. I didn't breathe, because the knocking wasn't coming from the front door. It was coming from behind me, from the back window I'd sworn to keep shut. I should never have checked him in. That's the first thing I want you to know. But I did, because when someone stands there, soaked to the bone, eyes like hollowed out coins, holding a fistful of cash. The rules suddenly feel like suggestions. The storm outside had grown violent. Snow whipped against the lodge windows with a sound like nails on a coffin lid. The wind howled down the chimney, rattling the radiator pipes, and somewhere a branch scraped against the roof. I could barely see the front steps through the blizzard, and yet he appeared as if the snow itself had delivered him, shadowed and dripping, leaning on the doorframe like he belonged there. "Car broke down," he said. "I can't leave," he added, almost as an afterthought. When I asked for ID, he shook his head, eyes darting past me, over my shoulder, like he expected someone, to be standing there. He insisted on paying cash, thick bills wet and heavy in my hands. The ink was smudged, almost illegible, and yet he smiled at me as if the transaction didn't matter. I handed him the key to room 9. As soon as he took it, he walked down the hall. His boots echoed against the polished wooden floors, though the hallway was otherwise empty. I double-checked the key rack. Room 9's tag was gone. He was already inside. Then the power cut out. Everything went black for a heartbeat. I swore I heard the faintest click, like a door closing, though the lodge was silent. The emergency lights flickered on, casting long, twisting shadows that seemed to crawl along the walls. And then I saw it, a silhouette under my office door. The hallway was empty, but that shadow, it wasn't mine, Eli. Mara's voice crackled through the radio. "Yeah, everything's fine," I lied, forcing calm into my voice. The lie tasted metallic in my mouth. I could feel it sticking there. I turned back toward room 9. The air smelled wrong, like burnt coffee and wet wool, but sour underneath. The door was closed, but faint scratches ran across the wood, shallow, almost deliberate. I swear I heard a whisper, something soft, crawling through the vents. "You should have followed the rules." I froze, my hands gripping the counter, knuckles white. I told myself it was the wind, maybe a rat in the walls, or maybe my imagination playing tricks. But the shadow didn't move, and the whisper came again, clearer this time. I could feel the vibration through the air vents, crawling across my skin. "You should have followed the rules." The guest, or whatever he was, didn't seem to notice me. Or maybe he did, but he didn't care. I tried to remember what he looked like. At first, I thought he was tall, broad-shouldered, dark coat. But in my mind, his figure shifted, sometimes shorter, thinner, like he was melting into the hallway. His face, I could never hold on to it. Some nights it was lined, tired. Other nights smooth, featureless, almost porcelain. His eyes remained the same, hollow coins, always watching. I poured a cup of coffee, tried to convince myself the steam would anchor me to reality. But when I looked at the counter clock, it had moved backward. 5 minutes. 10. I pinched myself. Nothing. Time itself seemed to hiccup, skipping, twisting. My memory of the day was fuzzy. Had the guest really arrived 5 minutes ago? Or had it been hours? A loud thump came from room 9. Not a footstep, something heavier. I swallowed, trying to steady my breath. Another thump, then scratching, and then silence. I went to the door, slowly, just my hand on the handle, cold metal biting my palm. I listened, no breathing, no moving, nothing. I wanted to turn around, call Mara, explain everything. But when I reached for the radio, the static changed. The whispers returned, now overlapping with something else. Laughter. Soft, dry, almost like a record skipping. Eli. Eli. My stomach dropped. That was my own voice calling me, not through the radio, but somewhere inside my head. My pulse raced. I tried to step back, but the floor seemed to tilt beneath me. Room 9 loomed ahead, the door dark, the scratches deeper now. Then came a sound that I can't explain, like metal dragged across tile. The lodge was old, the floors creaking, but this was different. It was deliberate, rhythmic, methodical, and it was coming toward the lobby. I turned sharply, empty hallway. My eyes followed the path of his boots. Nothing. I told myself again, it's a guest. Just a guest. He's real. But the truth kept slipping away. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my chest, like a tight coil squeezing my lungs. My memory of the accident, a car crash years ago, the one I'd buried deep in the Rockies, it resurfaced in jagged flashes. The smell of snow, the crunch of metal, the scream of someone who couldn't survive. And now, the lodge, the guest, the shadows, all of it twisting together, teasing me, punishing me. The clock struck 3. Rule number 4. If you hear knocking after 3 a.m., don't answer. A soft knock echoed from the vent near room 9. Not the door, the vent. The metal grill rattled. Then the whisper again. You should have followed the rules. I pressed my back against the counter, knees weak. The storm outside was a roar in my ears, the radio static crawling over everything, the lights flickering like a heartbeat. I wanted to run. I wanted to leave the lodge. But Rule No. 3 whispered in my mind, never leave before dawn. And so I waited, hands trembling, watching the shadows twist and writhe under the office door, listening to the guests' boots walking silently down a hallway that had no one in it. By the time dawn would come, if it came, I wasn't sure what would still be real. The lodge felt wrong. I can't explain it any other way. By the time I tried to radio Mara, the static swallowed her voice completely. My words bounced back at me from the receiver, distorted, warped, like I was talking to someone who wasn't there. Mara, are you? Hello? Nothing. I leaned against the counter, chest heaving. The hallway stretched endlessly ahead, each room door looming like a dark eye staring back at me. Room 9's door remained closed, silent now, but I could feel it. A presence, a weight pressing from the other side. My head spun, remembering the whispers through the vents, the shifting shadows, and the thought clawed at me. I shouldn't have checked him in. I tried the lodge's main phone. Dead. The storm outside had cut all lines. Maybe the snowstorm was to blame, or maybe I didn't want to finish that thought. It was then I noticed the footprints in the snow outside, visible through the frosted glass of the lobby doors. Boots, large, dragging slightly, leading away from the porch into the drifts. But they didn't return. I could see them vanish into the white nothing, as if swallowed by the storm itself. I swallowed hard. Room 9, the footprints, Mara, the guest, all of it tangled together. I couldn't tell which was real, which belonged to the lodge, which belonged to me. Desperate, I approached room 9. The door handle was ice cold under my palm. I twisted it slowly. The room was empty. No man, no bed disturbance. Just the faint smell of wet wool and something else. Something old, metallic, almost like rusted blood. I stumbled back, bumping into the wall. The radio crackled again. This time there was a voice, but it wasn't Mara's. Eli. My blood ran cold. It was me, my voice, repeating words I didn't remember saying. And somewhere beneath it, faint laughter, like someone recording the echo of my mistakes and playing it back. I tried to steady myself. The lodge's generator hummed weakly. Lights flickered, then went out completely. Total darkness. My flashlight barely cut a path down the hall. I realized my memory of the past hour was fragmented. disjointed flashes of the guest entering, leaving, reappearing. Sometimes he seemed to tower over me, sometimes shrink to nothing. My mind was twisting him like clay, molding the threat and fear into shapes I could almost comprehend. I went to the office to check the security monitors. The feed from room 9 made my stomach turn. I froze. The screen showed Mara sitting on the bed, smiling at me. But the timestamp said it was December 10th. My stomach lurched. The real date on the counterclock was also December 10th. No, that couldn't be. I flipped through the old guest book to see her handwriting. There it was, neat and precise. The last entry, Mara, room 9, December 10th. And beneath that, my own handwriting, wet and smeared, signing in a guest I didn't remember. The man, room 9. I pinched my face. My reflection in the monitor warped. Eyes wide, shadows under my cheekbones. Did I imagine him? Had I really let a stranger in? Or was he a projection of something I couldn't face? The guilt of the accident, buried deep in the Rockies years ago, clawed its way back. Faces, metal, snow, someone screaming. Someone I failed. I stumbled back to the hallway. Room 9's door clicked, closed. I was alone, and yet I wasn't. Footsteps, soft and deliberate, echoed along the floorboards. Not my own, and not the guest's boots, which now seemed to vanish entirely from memory. Shadows moved in impossible ways, a door ajar here, then closed there. I reached for the radio again, channel 7. Silence, except for a whisper crawling over the static. You shouldn't have left the lobby. I pressed my back against the wall, trying to remember the rules. Rule number 3, never leave before dawn. But the hallway stretched endlessly ahead. I felt drawn forward, compelled, even though every instinct screamed to run the opposite direction. Then I noticed the office door, locked. But the key to room 9 sat on the counter in front of me. I didn't remember putting it there. I reached out, trembling. My fingers grazed the cold metal. A voice, soft and coaxing, whispered through the vents. Come closer, Eli. It's time to remember. Remember what? I wanted to scream. I wanted Mara. I wanted the storm to take the lodge and leave me alone. But my feet moved on their own, toward the office, toward the room I didn't want to face. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. Snow beat against the walls. And inside the silence grew heavier, pressing in on me like water filling a glass. Room 9, Mara, the guest, my accident, all of it blending into one, a seamless, suffocating loop I couldn't break. I reached the office door. I turned the knob. Cold metal. My hand shook. And then I realized the door wasn't supposed to be locked. At least, not according to the rules I'd memorized. I pushed it open. The office was empty. Papers scattered. Coffee cup overturned. The monitor screens flickered. Static screaming across every feed. And then on one screen, I saw him, the guest. Or was it Mara? Or was it me? Standing behind the counter, staring at the door, smiling. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. And then, a soft click behind me. Room 9. The door shut, and I knew. When I turned back, whatever awaited me inside that room would decide if the lodge had been a refuge or a prison all along. I shouldn't be here. That's the first thing I need you to understand. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to leave the lodge forever, to never set foot on this mountain again. But the rules held me. They whispered in my mind like Mara herself, even though she was gone. Or was she? I stood behind the counter, staring at the hallway where room 9 sat closed and silent. The snowstorm had quieted outside, but inside, the lodge felt alive in a way that was wrong. The walls breathing, the floors creaking, shadows twisting like smoke. I could still hear whispers through the vents. You should have followed the rules. I traced my fingers over the yellowed sheet pinned behind the counter. The rules that had been my guide, my lifeline, my prison. Never look out the back window after midnight. If a guest arrives during a snowstorm, do not check them in. Never leave the lobby before dawn. If you hear knocking after 3 a.m., don't answer. Keep the radio on channel 7. Always. I had broken them all. Every single one. Every lie. Every defiance. Every moment I'd tried to assert control over this place had brought me here. The guest. Room 9. Mara. Myself. They blurred together until I couldn't tell who was real and who was a memory, a hallucination, or a ghost conjured by my guilt. I turned toward the monitor feeds, static, but one camera flickered. Room 9. And there he was, or maybe it was me, or Mara, impossible to tell. A figure stood there, silent, motionless, staring at the counter. The timestamp read December 10th. My pulse raced. My own hands were visible in the reflection, shaking, but the figure in the room moved in ways I couldn't control. I swallowed. My memory of the night, the guest arriving, the footprints, the whispering vents. It collapsed like snow on a roof. Pieces slid, twisted, shifted. Had I imagined him, or had I imagined myself? My memory of the car accident years ago, someone screaming, metal crunching. It bled into the lodge, into the guest, into Mara. The lodge wasn't just a building. It was a memory, a trap, a mirror. I moved toward room 9. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, warped by something I couldn't name. My flashlight cut a thin line through darkness, shaking with my hands. I reached the door, cold metal handle. I hesitated, one step forward, and whatever waited inside would see me. Maybe it already had. I opened the door, empty, or so it seemed. The bed was unmade, sheets twisted. Snow had tracked in, though the storm had long died down outside. A chair had tipped over, and in the corner, almost blending with the shadows, a figure crouched. Not moving, not breathing, watching, waiting. Eli. The voice came from the vents, the hallway, inside my head. My own voice, Mara's voice. Something older, deeper. I couldn't separate them. I realized then the truth. Room 9 had never been a room for guests. It was a room for me. My guilt, my failures, my memory of that car crash, of the person I couldn't save. All of it stored here, waiting for me to break the rules, waiting for me to acknowledge it. I stepped inside fully. My flashlight trembled in my grip. Shadows moved independently of the light. The figure in the corner rose slowly, stretching impossibly, bending time and space around it. I recognized myself in it, or maybe Mara, or the guest. A twisted reflection of all the fear I'd ignored. I backed away, heart hammering. My hand hit the desk. The radio flickered to life on channel 7. Static. Then a whisper. At sunrise, you either leave or you stay forever. I pressed my face to the window. Dawn. Pale, grey light seeping through the frost. The world outside seemed normal. Snow blanketed the earth, but inside, the lodge was alive, breathing, twisting, remembering. I knew the choice wasn't really mine. Staying meant confronting everything. The accident, the guest, Mara, the whispers, the rules. Leaving meant leaving myself behind. I turned back to the counter. On it lay the guest book. My hands shook as I opened it. Names smeared, dates shifting. December 10th repeated endlessly. And there, written clearly, was my own signature. The guest. Room 9. The check-in that shouldn't have happened. I had made him real. Or he had made me. I couldn't tell anymore. The door clicked. Room 9. The floorboards creaked. I couldn't move. The figure stepped into the hallway, melting into the shadows. My pulse stopped. Time stretched. I could feel every heartbeat echoing through the lodge. I whispered, almost to myself, almost to the lodge, almost to whoever was watching. If anyone new comes here, tell them to follow the rules. They'll keep you alive, or at least keep you from remembering what you did. Static swallowed my voice. The monitor feeds froze, the lobby empty. The hallway stretched endlessly. The lodge had decided, and I realized the final rule had always been unspoken. Rule number 6. Remember the rules, or you never leave. I sank into the chair behind the counter. Dawn broke outside. Pale light creeping over the snow. My mind frayed. Shadows danced where the walls should have been solid. And somewhere, deep in the vents, the whisper returned one last time. You broke the rules. Now you stay. I closed my eyes, trying to remember the world outside the lodge. The one where I was alive, where I had a choice. But it was gone. Lost to the mountain, the storm and the rules I had broken, the lodge waited. And I waited with IT.